My name is Arvin In Adlaw. Today, we're gonna tackle is all about modern philosophy and postmodernism. First is René Descartes. René Descartes is often referred to as the father of modern philosophy, a title he earned as a result of his rejection of the traditional scholastic Aristotelian philosophy of his time, as well as his development and promotion of the new mechanistic sciences. There were two major differences between his philosophy and that of the scholastic. First, given that scholastics' reliance on sensation as the source of all knowledge, Descartes thought their method was prone to doubt. Second, he wanted to replace their final causal model with more modern mechanist model of scientific explanation. Through his method of doubt, Descartes attempted to address the first issue. His basic strategy was to dismiss any belief that was subjected to even the tiniest amount of doubt. This hyperbolic doubt then clears the way for what Descartes regards as an unbiased search for the truth. This erasure of his previously held beliefs placed him at epistemological. Descartes then sets out to discover something that is beyond all doubt. One of the deepest and most lasting legacies of Descartes' philosophy is his thesis that mind and body are really distinct. A thesis now called mind-body dualism. He reaches his conclusion by arguing that the nature of the mind that is a thinking non-extended thing is completely different from that of the body that is an extended non-thinking thing, and therefore it is possible for one to exist without the other. This argument gives rise to the famous problem of mind-body causal interaction still debated today. How can the mind cause some of our bodily limbs to move? For example, raising one's hands to ask a question, and how can the body sense organ cause sensation in the mind when their natures are completely different? This article examines these issues as well as Descartes' own response to his problem through his brief remarks on how the mind is united with the body to form a human being. This will show how these issues arise because of misconception about Descartes' theory of mind, body, union, and how to correct conception of their union avoids the versions of the problem. The article begins with an examination of term real distinction and of Descartes' probable motivations for maintaining his dualist thesis. Substance dualism is the most basic form of dualism, requiring that the mind and body be made up of two ontologically distinct substances. The term substance can be interpreted in a variety of ways, but for our purposes, we'll use the account of the substance associated with Armstrong as something that logically capable of existing on its own. According to the dualist, the mind or soul that the mind and body can causally affect each other. Interactionism is the name of this type of substance dualism. Occasionalism and parallelism are two other types of substance dualism. These theories are mostly historical relics. The occasionalist believes that the mind and body are separate entities when we hit our thumb with a hammer, for example, and painful and distressing sensation occurs, they may appear to be. Occasionalists, such as Millibranch, believe that the sensation is caused by God rather than the hammer and nerves. God creates appropriate experiences out of the occurrences of the natural world. According to him, person has comprised to mind, think, and questions or doubt what the body has experienced and body perceives from the different senses. Philosophy was founded on the principle of radical doubt, which holds that nothing we see or sense is necessarily true. The only thing that remains true is that there is a mind or consciousness doubting and believing its perception as expressed in the famous phrase, I think, therefore I am, or in Latin, cogito ergo sum. Descartes also proposed that the mind and body were two separate and its distinct entities, but the body, like everything else in the world, could only be sensed because there was a mind to sense it. Next is John Luke. The term blank slate or tabula rasa has two meanings in psychology. The first is based on the belief that all humans are born with the ability to transform into anything or anyone. This viewpoint minimizes that role of genetics and biology in the formation of human personality. The second meaning of blank slate refers to psychoanalysis techniques that was once widely used and is still used by some therapists today. The therapist is careful not to reveal any personal information about themselves when using this technique. The modern era most influential political philosopher, he defended the claim that men are by nature free and equal against claims. The God had made all people naturally subject to a monarch in the two treatises part of his justification for viewing legitimate political government as the result of social contract in which people in the natural state conditionally transfer some of their rights to the government in order to improve the stability and comfort the lives, liberty, and property. In time, the mind comes to reflect in its own operation about the ideas got by sensation and thereby stores itself with new set of ideas, which I call ideas of reflection. These are impressions that are made on our sense by outward objects that are extrinsical to the mind, and its own operation proceeding from power intrinsical and proper to itself, which when reflected on by itself become also object of its contemplation. Thus, the first capacity of human intellects is that the mind is fitted to receive the impressions made on it, either through the senses by outward objects or by its own operation with it reflects on them. This is the first step a man makes towards the discovery of anything and the groundwork whereon to build all those notions which ever shall have naturally in this world. All those sublime thoughts which tower above the clouds and reach as high as heaven itself take their rise and footing here. In all the great extent wherein the mind wanders, in those remote speculation it may seem to be elevated with its stairs, none one job beyond those ideas which since our reflection have offered for its contemplation. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Christian J. Quintero, and I will be tackling about the David Hume, a Scottish philosopher, which self-accumulation believes that different impressions and does not exceed the physical realm. So the physical realm is everything you can perceive with your senses, like taste, touch, sight, smell, and hearing, not just on earth, but anywhere anything exists. As vast as the physical realm is, it seems somewhat limited compared to the non-physical. The non-physical is even harder to define using words. But one thing seems certain: the physical realm is powered by the non-physical, not the other way around. When you live entirely within the physical realm, you experience life as chaotic and untrustworthy. You lack direction and purpose. Your reality is limited, and your truth is science. The mind relying only on knowledge loses its balance and becomes confused. It can justify any behavior, no matter how destructive. Life lived purely within the confines of the physical world is unstable and, for lack of better words, unbearable. That's all. Thank you.
I'm Sean Brian Compuesto and I'm reporting for the topic Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant is a German philosopher that is known for his works on empiricism and rationalism. Immanuel Kant is the central figure in modern philosophy. He synthesized early modern rationalism and empiricism, set the terms for much 19th and 20th century philosophy, and continues to exercise a significant influence today in metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, political philosophy, aesthetics, and other fields. Argued that transcendental apperception is an essence of our consciousness that provides a foundation for understanding and establishing the concept of self by synthesizing one's accumulation of experiences, intuition, and imagination. He argues that the human understanding is the source of general laws of nature that structure all our experience, and that human reason gives itself the moral law, which is our basis for belief in God, freedom, and immortality. Transcendental idealism is one of the major beliefs that Kant postulated in his philosophical approaches. Kant claimed that human beings focus too much on appearance but not on their feelings and their inner world. He asserted that space and time were only immanent forms of human hunch. To advance that reasoning, Kant referred to it as transcendental idealism. But Descartes argued that an individual could actually extrapolate the existence of objects outside him or her, basing them on knowledge of his own existence. However, Kant strongly rejected this reasoning. External objects, according to him, could not be known through inference. Kant argued the moral responsibilities were based on categorical imperative, meaning that a moral individual breached the categorical imperative. Kant immensely contributed to modern philosophy. He bridged the rationalist school of thought to the empiricist reasoning and outlined the difference between how things were and how we perceive them. Due to his work, philosophers have established a distinct difference between empiricism and rationalism.
Good day, everyone. My name is Jerby Villagonzal. I'm reporting Paul Porchland. Churchland explores the unfolding impact of the several empirical sciences of the mind, especially cognitive neurobiology and computational neuroscience on a variety of traditional issues central to the discipline of philosophy. Representing Churchland's most recent research, they continue his research program, launched over 30 years ago, which has evolved into the field of neurophilosophy. Topics such as the nature of consciousness, the nature of cognition, and the intelligence the nature of moral knowledge and moral reasoning, neurosemantics or world representation in the brain, the nature of our subjective sensory and their relation to the objective science, and the future of philosophy itself are here addressed in a lively, graphical, and accessible manner. Throughout the volume, Churchland's view that science is as important as philosophy is emphasized. Several of the color figures in the volume will allow the reader to perform some novel phenomenological experiments on his or her own visual system. Churchland explains eliminative materialism and how it supports the idea that folk psychology is just a theory that will be eradicated with proper scientific data. In doing so, he says knowledge of other minds thus has no essential depends on knowledge of one's own mind. I completely agree with the statement and think it is an excellent point in proving the implausibility of folk psychology. Conclusions reached by the belief of folk psychology can hardly be accepted as veritable, since folk psychology itself is simply a theory, and the integrity of any inferences made based solely on it will, by extension, also be questioned. I am in complete agreement with the idea of folk psychology being a theory. It seems to be completely empirical. Is there any way to test its soundness? Without measurable data, there is nothing to support the ideas behind folk psychology, which is cause enough to denote that it's just a theory and possible one that is ultimately false. Eliminative materialism supports the fact that the existence of folk psychology is not real. My question is, why anyone believes anything else? What is it about folk psychology that allows it to be so lacking but still be widely accepted as true it were scientific fact? There are people who are really in the fact that folk psychology give us legitimate fundamental explanation of behavior. It seems that underlying opinion about folk psychology is that while it may not be perfect or 100% true, it's good enough. I believe that scientific method can be applied to all types of problems and situations. So while I don't think folk psychology is adequate enough to be considered science, I think it should be approached and analyzed as such. There basically already exists a hypothesis or some belief about it. So why hasn't anything been tested to try to make this theory a law? It seems as though the common attitude about it is that it, for some reason, useful and should stay around. The view of realism is that most of it is true. I don't think it should be all allowed to thrive as philosophical idea if it's not accurate. What are we gaining from it? It's not all the way true. The self as the brain according to Paul Churchland. Dualism. So here's a question. Why do people say read my mind instead of read my brain? Along the same lines, why is it brain surgery instead of mind surgery? Interest- Interestingly, we can find an answer in today's lesson as we explore the works of Paul Churchland, especially his theories on self and the brain. Since Churchland is a modern-day philosopher who studied the brain, let's first take a look at some older philosophical theories on the subject. For much of history, many Western philosophers have held to the theory of dualism. When it comes to discussing human life, dualism is the idea that the mind and the body are separate. In other words, we all have a physical brain, but we also have separate mind. Adding to this distinction, dualists have historically asserted Edmund Husserl, German philosopher, the founder of phenomenology, a method for the description and analysis of consciousness, through which philosophy attempts to gain the character of a strict science. The method reflects an effort to resolve the opposition between empiricism, which stresses observation, and rationalism, which stresses reason and theory, by indicating the origin of all philosophical and scientific systems and developments of theory in the interests and structures of the experiential life. Edmund Husserl was the principal founder of phenomenology and thus one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century. He has made important contributions to almost all areas of philosophy and anticipated central ideas of its neighboring disciplines such as linguistics, sociology, and cognitive psychology, arguing that transcend, transcendental consciousness sets the limits of all possible knowledge. Husserl redefined phenomenology as transcendental idealist philosophy. He remains the notable figure in contemporary philosophy and beyond.
Maris Jean Jacques Malponte, and I am Renel Jairo Carrion, then French philosopher. So the phenomenology is commonly understood in either of two ways as a disciplinary field in philosophy or as a movement in the history of philosophy. Carlo Ponti was born on March 14, 1908 and purchased a merchant and maritime France after his father a culinary livery captain and a knight of the Legion of Honor died in 1913. He relocated to Paris with his family. Later in life, he would describe his boyhood as impeccably peaceful. He stayed close to his mother until her death, and Johnson decided in his Louis Grant of her secondary education, completing his first course in philosophy. With the Adjunct of Johnson Cherry in 1923 at the year he received the school award for outstanding achievement in philosophy, and he would secondly attribute his dedication of the education of philosophy to the discourse source. From the first issue of the Princeton's Modernism in October 1945 until his death, Ponte wrote regularly on politics, including reflections on contemporary events as well as explorations of their philosophical underpinnings and the broader political significance of these times during his eighth tenure of unofficial managing editor or less terms. He started to review political direction and plan many of political editorials. The discipline of phenomenology may be defined is a study structure of experience or consciousness. Literally, phenomenology is the study of phenomena appears of things, or things are they appear of experience, or their way we experience things. Those the meanings things have we our experience. Phenomenology studies conscious experience from subjects of first person point of view. This view of philosophy is then the from to relate to the other fields of philosophy. And the action of behavior of language use will be said to the reflection of our united perception.
I'm GBL Contain and I will be tackling Jacques Derrida's into postmodernism. So, Jacques Derrida is a well known for his controversial approach to understanding the world, the destruction method, and was a major contributor to postmodernism. The deconstruction method is a process of criticizing literary texts, philosophical theories. So, deconstruction is a philosophical movement and theory of literary criticism that questions traditional assumptions about certainty, identity, and truth, asserts the world can only refer to the other words, and attempts to demonstrate how statements of any text subvert their own meanings. In deconstruction, the critic claims there is no meaning to be found in the actual facts, but only the various, often mutually irreconcilable, virtual texts constructed by readers in the research for meaning. And according to the reader, deconstruction generally operates by conducting textual readings with a view to demonstrate that the text is not a discrete whole, instead containing several irreconcilable, contradictory meanings. This process ostensibly shows that any text that has more than one interpretation, that the text itself links this interpretation.
Good day, everyone. I'm Ian Rodrigo T. Galiantes, and I'm about to report about Richard Rorty. Richard Mackay Rorty was born on October 4, 1931, and died on June 8, 2007. He was an American philosopher, educated at the University of Chicago and Yale University. He had strong interest and training in both the history of philosophy and contemporary analytic philosophy, the latter of which came to constitute the main focus of his work at Princeton University in 1960s. He subsequently came to reject the tradition of philosophy according to which knowledge involves correction, representation, a mirror of nature, a world whose existence remains wholly independent of the representation. Rotary believed that abandoning representationalist accounts of knowledge and language would lead to a state of mind. He referred to it as ironism, in which people become completely aware of the contingency of their placement in history and of their philosophical vocabulary. What is ironism? Ironism is the state of doubt regarding one's own vocabulary that cannot be removed by making arguments in that vocabulary. And what is mental mirroring? Mental mirroring is a representation or mental imagery enable representing things that have been never experienced as well as things that do not exist.
An Eastern philosophy is that there is one reality. All life may be viewed as sacred, The divine is a part of creation and found everywhere in it. The journey of mankind is cyclical. Goal: to deal with the problem of ignorance and achieve enlightenment. So, in Eastern, it represents Asia, developed and notation of collectivism, believes that other persons are part of yourself, values hierarchy, values cooperations, close relation between philosophy and religions, employs perception, reasoning, intuition, and traditional authority in its pursuit and philosophical vision. So we have also in Eastern, there are also principles. Man is a part of the cosmic unity. Life is a journey towards internal realities beyond the world. Eternal return, the universe will continue to recur. Inner world dependent, self-liberation from the false or me and finding the true me. An Eastern philosophy or an Asian philosophy includes the various philosophies that originated in East and South Asia, including Chinese philosophy, Japanese, Korean, and Vietnamese philosophies. All of these are dominant in East Asia and Vietnam, and Indian philosophy, including Hindu, Jain, Buddhist philosophy, which are dominant in South Asia and Southeast Asia, Tibet, and Mongolia. That's all. Thanks.